Antonio Scurati from Milan, thank you so much for being on our show. And also thank you for your fascinating trilogy about Benedetto Mussolini and this pamphlet that also has been published in the Netherlands about fascism and populism. When did you feel the urge to write this pamphlet about the current situation? Because you are a historian.
Well, as a matter of fact, I am a novelist. Everything begins with my novels, and the idea of the pamphlet, it comes from the novels. So many readers wrote to me and told me about the fact they were amazed with the analogies between the past and the present days. And so they pushed me to this pamphlet, to this reflection on my present days, and to underline all these analogies.
Where specifically do you see the comparisons between the time of Mussolini and what is right now happening if we're talking about populism?
Well, my thesis is this. Fascism is not coming back in its historical form, but populism is somehow the new fascism. I mean, Mussolini, under my point of view, has been not only the founder of fascism, but also the first populist leader in history. So many aspects of his politics are a model for nowadays populists, even if they don't know anything about it. First of all, is the idea that the leader can state, I am the people, and the people, it's me, and which is a crazy thing to say. It cannot be real, but they don't care. And once you have stated this, I am the people, everyone who's not with you is against the people, and that's a big trouble for democracy.
Right. Would you say, or let me phrase it in another way. We saw last week the verdict in the trial against Donald Trump, presidential candidate. And when this verdict came through and he walked out of the courtroom, he said, this was a rigged trial. The real verdict will be on November the 5th by the people.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's the demonstration of my point. Everyone who's not with me is not against me, but is against the people, and that means that I do not acknowledge all the everyone, everything, every institution. I do not acknowledge the right of the justice, the right of the science, the intellectuals, the parliament. The last of maybe the first aftermath of this crazy statement is that the parliament is not useful anymore. Because if I am the people and the people embodies in me their leaders, what's the parliament for? We can shut it up. Right. And that's what they tried to do.
After the rise in your country of Meloni, the prime minister now of the party Fratelli d'Italia, the same happened here. As you know, the PVV of Geert Wilders won the last parliamentary elections in the Netherlands. Were you surprised that this is happening all at the same time?
Not surprised. I'm surprised that it's happening in Netherlands, to be honest. Less surprised that it's happening in Italy. I saw it coming. You see, in Italy, we don't have a tradition of conservative, liberal right wing. Our right wing political tradition goes back to fascism in the 20th centuries. But we've had in the last decades many signs, many symptoms of the fact of the crisis of democracy. People is discouraged. People feels insecure. People is frustrated. There is a kind of a political melancholy in Europe, and that's the best ground for the rising of these anti-democratic movements, parties, and leaders.
But why were you surprised that it was happening in the Netherlands, that a hard right-wing party won the elections?
Because we people from southern Italy, southern Europe, intellectual from Italy, we look up to Netherlands as a country of freedom, a country that has a very deep-rooted liberal and culture, and so we were very discouraged by seeing what's happening in your country. Maybe even more than what by seeing what's happening in our country. We expected more what's happening in Italy than in Netherlands.
Yeah. Are you worried about what you are writing? Well, surely enough, you are worried about the rise of populism and the fact that we have these political leaders now that are not really interested in democracy. Are you worried that this will be a floodgate which has opened now in Europe?
Well, I am worried, of course, but it's important to understand that we don't have to fear something from the future. Many people here say, since I'm the author of a trilogy on fascism, that fascism could come back. Tomorrow we could face a new fascism. And what I always say to the people, you don't have to look to the future. It's already happening. Of course, not the coming back of fascism, but this new movement, leader parties that despaired democracy, liberal democracy, they're already here. They already won the election. You don't have to fear from the future. You have to fear from the present.
Yeah. In your pamphlet, you describe, or you tell that people sometimes think of a democracy as an oak, a very strong tree. But you compare democracy to a vine. Why? Yeah. And why is this image important to you, the vine?
But first of all, because I own a very small vine in a very beautiful place in southern Italy, on the Amalfi Coast, and I know how much work and love the vine requires from us. You know, we going back to the metaphor, we imagine democracy as an oak, something that can only be cut down, destroyed by a storm. But I think it's much more similar to a vine, because the vine is fragile. It needs everyday work from us, everyday love. We have to tide it and protect it from the disease. And only if you do that day by day, season after season, at the end you can drink the tasteful and wine of democracy.
And that's what is needed now, more love and care for democracy?
Yeah, and work. We're not used to fight for democracy anymore. We belong to a privilege, to a very, very happy generation. I grew up in the 80s, and I remember that I was never concerned with politics in my whole life. And it's funny to say now, we kids of the 80s believed that democracy was given once and for all, and that was not true. We grew up in democracy because our grandfather and fathers fought for it, and that's what we must learn back. If you think that democracy is the best way of living compared to any other political human experiment, well, you have to fight for it.
Recently, you yourself became world news, not only because of your books, but also because you wrote a monologue for the state broadcaster RAI. And that monologue was not being broadcasted because of what you were writing. Is this something that is very worrisome to you, the censorship?
Yes, of course, but it's not the only case of limitation of freedom of speech in my country. There is one case every day almost. You see that monologue was about the commemoration of a very, very well-known victim of fascism 100 years ago. Giacomo Matteotti was killed by fascists in 1924. And in that monologue, I criticized President Meloni because she never speaks the word anti-fascist. Never. She refuses to do it. And I only underscored that problem and asked some question. And that was enough to be whipped out, cancelled.
Yeah. Prime Minister Meloni, in the end, she published on her Facebook page your monologue. Were you surprised that she did this? And why did she do it, you think?
That was the worst part of it. Because at that moment, the monologue was already widely broadcasted everywhere in Italy by journalists on their TV shows, on the internet, and so everyone already knew it. And I say that was the worst part of it because, unfortunately, President Meloni, by doing that, attacked me personally with very disparaging and denigrating words. And I think that you cannot imagine in your country your prime minister who attacks on a personal level a writer, an intellectual, by denigrating him in front of the whole country.
Antonio Scurati, thank you so much for being with us today on Buitenhof. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Bedankt voor het kijken. Vond je dit een goed gesprek? Vergeet je vooral niet te abonneren, een like of een comment achter te laten. Dat kan natuurlijk ook.
And also, solidarity and support to Russian civil society is just as needed. Because if we want to see Russia a democracy one day, and I want to repeat myself, that is the only guarantee of peace and stability on this continent.